The family ignored my son's birthday party and then demanded $1,800 for my brother's graduation. So I sent $1 taped to a graduation card where I wrote, "This is the same amount of consideration you showed when you left Theo, waiting 4 hours at McDonald's with his special Happy Meal getting cold because something came up." The commitment was my mother's neighbor's dog's birthday barbecue. I found out through Facebook photos tagged at the exact time of the party, everyone laughing and toasting while my 7-year-old son asked me if he had done something wrong. I mailed that card priority overnight, signature required, addressed to my brother Derek at my parents' house, where the entire family was gathering to celebrate his MBA graduation. My mother's text came exactly 47 minutes after the delivery confirmation. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time. Don't bother coming to any future events. We're done with your dramatics." I screenshotted that message. I would need it later. The truth is, I should have seen this coming years ago when I chose nursing school over law school, when I married Miguel who worked construction instead of finishing his architecture degree, when I got pregnant at 25 instead of climbing some corporate ladder. My mother stopped introducing me as her daughter at her book club meetings. My father would change the subject whenever his golf buddies asked about his kids, launching into elaborate stories about Derek's internships and achievements, while I sat across the dinner table feeding Theo mashed carrots. But I kept trying. I kept showing up to family dinners where my mother would seat us at the kitchen table while Derek and his girlfriend got the formal dining room. I kept bringing homemade dishes to holidays where my mother would place them in the back of the buffet line, barely touched by the end of the night. I kept inviting them to Theo's school plays and parent-teacher conferences where his teacher would rave about his artwork and kindness, only to have them cancel at the last minute with increasingly transparent excuses. The McDonald's party was supposed to be different. Theo had been begging for a birthday party with his cousins for months. My sister-in-law Carmen had 3 kids around his age, and they lived just 20 minutes away. Simple, I thought. Low pressure. I picked McDonald's specifically because it was casual. No one would have to dress up or bring gifts if they didn't want to. Just show up, let the kids play in the play place, eat some chicken nuggets, sing happy birthday. 2 hours of basic human decency was all I was asking. I sent the invitation 6 weeks in advance. My mother responded immediately, "We'll be there. Derek and Carmen too. The kids have been asking about Theo." I actually cried when I read that message, relief flooding through me that maybe, finally, we were turning a corner. Maybe they would see Theo the way his teachers did, the way his friends' parents did, this creative, sensitive little boy who drew elaborate superhero comics and always shared his snacks at school. I spent 3 weeks planning every detail. Theo wanted a superhero theme, so I made centerpieces with his favorite characters. I ordered a special cake from the bakery that did those photo cakes, Theo's face superimposed on Spider-Man's body. I bought goodie bags for his cousins filled with small toys and candy. I even created a playlist of songs Theo loved, downloading them onto my phone so we could play them during the party. The day of the party, I got to McDonald's an hour early to set everything up. The staff helped me arrange the tables, hang some streamers, set out the decorations. Theo wore his favorite Spider-Man shirt and kept asking what time everyone was coming. "Noon," I told him, checking my watch for the 10th time. Grandma said, "Noon." Noon came. No one. I texted my mother, "We're all set up. See you soon." No response. 12:15, Theo was getting restless, asking if he could start playing. "Let's wait for your cousins," I said, smiling through my growing anxiety. 12:30, I called my mother. Straight to voicemail. I called Carmen. No answer. I called Derek. Voicemail. I texted everyone. Nothing. By 1, Theo had stopped asking questions. He sat at the table, staring at the untouched cake, his little shoulders hunched. I ordered his Happy Meal, trying to make it seem special, but he barely touched it. We sat there until 2:30. Me making increasingly desperate excuses while Theo grew quieter and quieter. Other families came and went, kids laughing and celebrating, while we sat alone at our decorated table. "Did I do something wrong?" Theo finally asked, his voice so small it broke something fundamental inside me. "Is that why nobody came?" I drove home in silence, Theo clutching his cold Happy Meal, the special cake melting in its box in the passenger seat. When I got home, I numbly logged into Facebook, some masochistic need to understand what emergency had kept my entire family away. That's when I saw it. Photos from my mother's neighbor's backyard. Everyone was there. My mother in her good sundress, the one she wore to nice occasions. Derek and Carmen with their kids, all dressed in matching outfits. My father manning a grill. They weren't even trying to hide it. The timestamps showed the party had started at 11:30, half an hour before Theo's party. The caption on my mother's photo made me physically ill. Such a special day celebrating Princess Fluffy's 3rd birthday. Linda throws the best parties, so grateful for wonderful neighbors and family who know how to celebrate properly. Princess Fluffy, a golden doodle. They had skipped my son's 7th birthday party for a dog's birthday party. I sat on my bathroom floor and cried until Miguel found me 2 hours later. But somewhere in that breakdown, something crystallized. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. Done trying to earn love from people who had decided years ago that I wasn't worth their time. Done exposing my son to people who valued a neighbor's pet over their own grandson. Done pretending that if I just tried harder, did better, was more successful, they would finally see us. The graduation announcement arrived 2 weeks later. A formal embossed invitation on expensive cardstock. Derek was graduating with his MBA from a prestigious program, and my parents were hosting a celebration dinner at a country club. The invitation included a note written in my mother's perfect script. We're asking family to contribute to Derek's student loan repayment as a graduation gift. Suggested amount, $1, $800 per household. This will help him start his career without financial burden. $1,800. For a man who already had a 6-figure job lined up, from a family who couldn't spare 2 hours for their grandson's birthday. I stared at that invitation for a long time. Then I went to my desk and pulled out a single dollar bill. I folded it carefully and taped it to the inside of a graduation card I bought at the drugstore. The front said, "Congratulations, graduate," in cheerful letters. Inside, beneath the pre-printed message, I wrote in my clearest handwriting, "This is the same amount of consideration you showed when you left Theo waiting 4 hours at McDonald's with his special Happy Meal getting cold because something came up. Enjoy your party. We'll be celebrating people who actually show up for us." I mailed it priority overnight. Signature required, addressed to Derek at my parents' house where I knew everyone would be gathering the day before the party. I wanted them all there when it arrived. I wanted them to open it together to see what I had finally understood. Their love was conditional, transactional, and not worth the degradation of chasing it anymore. My mother's text came less than an hour after the delivery confirmation. I saved that message. I also saved every single Facebook photo from Princess Fluffy's party. I documented every text message thread, every unanswered phone call, every canceled plan. I created a folder on my laptop titled Family Documentation. I didn't know exactly what I would need it for yet, but I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't over, because as much as they wanted to be done with me, I had finally accepted something they didn't realize. I had been the one holding this family together. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who checked in on everyone, who organized the group messages and holiday plans. I was the glue they took for granted, and now I was going to let them feel exactly what it was like when that glue dissolved. The first crack appeared 3 days after I sent the graduation card. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who lived 2 states away, called me completely out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in over a year, our relationship reduced to perfunctory birthday messages and holiday texts. "Rebecca, what on earth is happening with your mother?" Her voice was sharp with confusion. "She called me yesterday absolutely hysterical, saying you've turned vindictive and cruel, that you're trying to ruin Derek's graduation over some petty grudge." I took a slow breath. "Did she mention why I might be upset? Something about you being dramatic over missing some party? She said you've always been jealous of Derek's success and now you're lashing out." The party she missed was Theo's 7th birthday, at McDonald's. The entire family confirmed they'd be there, then went to her neighbor's dog's birthday party instead. Theo waited for 4 hours. He asked me if he'd done something wrong to make everyone hate him. Silence. Then, they went to a what? I sent her the Facebook photos, the timestamps, the screenshots of the unanswered texts and calls from that day. "Aunt Patricia, I need you to understand something. This isn't about one party. This is about years of my son being treated like he doesn't exist. I'm done pretending that's normal." She didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice had changed completely. "Rebecca, I had no idea. Your mother has always painted such a different picture of your relationship. She told everyone you were difficult, that you kept Theo away from the family deliberately. I did the opposite. I begged them to be involved in his life. I'm seeing that now." Another pause. "I'm not coming to Derek's graduation party, and I'm calling your mother to tell her exactly why." That was the first domino. By the end of the week, 3 more aunts and uncles had reached out, each with similar stories. My mother had spent years carefully crafting a narrative about me: the ungrateful daughter, the jealous sister, the difficult one who always created drama. She'd been so convincing that no one had questioned why I was rarely at family events anymore, why my son was never in family photos, why I'd become increasingly absent from the family narrative. But the graduation card had cracked that carefully constructed story, and once people started asking questions, the whole facade began to crumble. My cousin Jennifer called next. She was Derek's age, had always been close to our family, and I'd admired her growing up. "I'm so sorry," she said without preamble. "I should have noticed. I should have said something. The way they talked about you and Miguel at family dinners, I just accepted it as truth. I didn't realize it was character assassination." "What did they say?" I needed to know. That Miguel was lazy, that you were struggling financially because he couldn't hold down a job, that you were embarrassed by your choices so you avoided the family, that Theo had behavioral problems, and you were in denial about needing help for him. Her voice cracked. "Rebecca, I believed them. I'm so ashamed that I believed them. Miguel didn't have behavioral problems. He worked construction, sometimes 60-hour weeks, to provide for our family. We lived modestly but comfortably. Theo was thriving in school, popular with his classmates, reading above grade level. Every single thing my family had said about us was a calculated lie designed to justify their neglect. The second crack came from an unexpected source. Carmen, my sister-in-law. She showed up at my house on a Saturday afternoon, her 3 kids in the car. She looked exhausted. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tight. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table and started crying. "Derek is furious with me. Your mother is threatening to cut us off. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it from me before anyone else spins it." She told me that the dog party hadn't been a sudden thing. My mother had planned to go to it for weeks. 3 days before Theo's birthday, my mother had called Carmen and explicitly told her not to attend Theo's party. "She said you were just doing it for attention, that you'd canceled so many times before that we shouldn't bother. She said if we went, we were choosing sides against Derek, and it would impact our relationship with the family." "I should have questioned it," Carmen continued, wiping her eyes. "But your mother is so convincing, and Derek always backs her up, and I was pregnant with our 4th and exhausted, and I just didn't have the energy to fight. So I went along with it. And when I saw Theo's face in that Facebook photo you posted from the party afterward, him sitting alone with that cake, I felt sick. I knew we'd done something terrible." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because your mother is planning something. She's been on the phone constantly since your card arrived, calling every family member, doubling down on her version of events. She's telling people you're mentally unstable, that you're having some kind of breakdown, that Miguel is controlling you and turning you against your family. She's trying to get ahead of the story, to make sure everyone blames you before they have a chance to question her." Carmen pulled out her phone and showed me a group text thread I wasn't part of. Family members discussing my concerning behavior, my paranoid accusations, my need for professional help. My mother was leading the charge, painting herself as the concerned parent trying to get her troubled daughter the help she needed. "She's trying to have you declared an unfit parent," Carmen said quietly. "She mentioned it to Derek last night. She wants to file for grandparents' rights, claim that you're unstable and Theo needs intervention. Derek told her she was going too far, but she's not listening to anyone anymore." Ice flooded my veins. She was going to try to take my son. My mother, who couldn't spare 2 hours for his birthday, was now threatening to use the legal system to separate us. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked again. "Derek will never forgive you, because it's wrong. Because I have 3 sons, and if someone treated them the way your family has treated Theo, I would burn the world down." She met my eyes. "And because Derek isn't the man I thought I married, watching him go along with all of this, watching him participate in the cruelty, I don't recognize him anymore. I need to protect my kids from becoming like that." After Carmen left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about my mother's nuclear strategy. She was escalating because she was cornered, because the family narrative was crumbling and she needed to regain control. Grandparents' rights cases were difficult to win, but they were expensive to defend against, emotionally devastating, and would drag on for months, unless I moved first. I called my nurse manager at the hospital where I worked. "I need to document something officially. Can we set up a meeting with HR?" Then I called my son's pediatrician. "I need copies of all of Theo's medical records and developmental assessments, complete documentation showing his well-being." Then I called his school. "I need written statements from his teachers about his behavior, academic performance, and social development." Then I called Miguel. "We need a lawyer, not later, now." Finally, I opened my laptop and began compiling everything, Every missed event, every broken promise, every lie my family had spread. Facebook posts with timestamps, text message threads, witness statements from Carmen, from my aunts, from anyone who had seen the truth. I created a timeline spanning 7 years, documenting the systematic exclusion and emotional abuse of my son. My mother wanted a war. She had no idea she'd just handed me every weapon I needed to destroy her completely. The lawyer Miguel and I hired, Rachel Chen, specialized in family law and had a reputation for aggressive representation. She was expensive, but after reviewing my documentation, she took the case with an intensity that made me think this was personal for her somehow. "Your mother is making a catastrophic mistake," Rachel said during our first meeting, spreading my evidence across her conference table. "Grandparents' rights exist to maintain established relationships when parents unreasonably sever contact. What you've documented here is the opposite. Grandparents who systematically neglected and excluded their grandchild, then threatened legal action when the parent finally set boundaries." She pointed to Carmen's text messages. "This is gold. She's confirming premeditated exclusion and discussing your mother's retaliatory intentions. If your mother actually files for grandparents' rights, we won't just defeat it. We'll make her regret ever making the threat. I want more than that," I said quietly. "I want everyone to know exactly what they've done. I'm tired of being the villain in their story." Rachel studied me carefully. "How far are you willing to go?" "As far as necessary." Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. The Rebecca who had spent years people-pleasing and apologizing disappeared, replaced by someone methodical and cold. I documented everything. I recorded phone calls. Legally, in my one-party consent state, I saved every text message. I created spreadsheets tracking every invitation extended and rejected, every promise made and broken. But I also did something more strategic. I started reaching out to people in my family's social circle, not to complain, but simply to reconnect. My mother's book club friends, my father's golf buddies, Derek's professional contacts. I didn't mention the family drama. I just reestablished myself in their awareness, reminded them that I existed, that I was articulate and professional, and nothing like the unstable person my mother was describing. "You're building credibility," Rachel explained. "When this goes public, and it will go public, you need people to have recent positive impressions of you. Your mother has been controlling the narrative for years. We're going to systematically dismantle it." The breaking point came at Derek's graduation party. I didn't attend, obviously, but Carmen did, and she sent me updates throughout the evening. My mother had invited over 60 people to the country club. The venue was decorated elaborately. Derek gave a speech thanking everyone who had supported his educational journey. "He thanked Mom and Dad for their unwavering faith in him," Carmen texted. "He thanked me for being understanding about his long study hours. He thanked your parents' friends for their encouragement and connections. He didn't mention you once. It's like you never existed." But Carmen also sent me something else. Video footage. Her phone positioned on the gift table, recording as people arrived and deposited envelopes. She'd captured every single person's contribution, visible through the translucent envelopes or announced proudly as they were placed. The amounts were staggering. My parents' friends each gave between $500 and $1. $1. Family members contributed their requested $1,800. By Carmen's count, Derek received over $47, $0 in cash gifts that night. My single dollar was displayed prominently in the center of the gift table, my card open beside it, my message visible to everyone who approached. Carmen said my mother had placed it there deliberately, pointing it out to guests as evidence of my cruelty and pettiness. But Carmen also recorded the reactions. People reading the card, their expressions shifting from confusion to understanding to discomfort. 3 days after the party, my mother finally filed for grandparents' rights. The petition was 12 pages of carefully crafted lies. It claimed I had suddenly and without explanation cut off all contact with my family. It described Theo as emotionally disturbed and socially isolated. It painted Miguel as controlling and potentially abusive. It suggested I was suffering from postpartum depression, 7 years after giving birth, and making irrational decisions that endangered my son's well-being. Rachel read the petition and smiled. She just handed us everything. She's made specific, documentable false claims under oath. This isn't just going to fail. This is going to result in sanctions. We filed our response 2 weeks later. It was 47 pages long, not including the 200 pages of supporting evidence. It included every text message, every Facebook post, every witness statement. It included Theo's medical records showing exemplary health and development. It included statements from his teachers, his pediatrician, and his school counselor, all confirming he was thriving. It included financial records showing Miguel and I were stable and responsible. But most devastatingly, it included a detailed timeline of every event my family had missed, every promise they'd broken, every lie they'd spread. Carmen's statement about the deliberate exclusion from the birthday party, my aunt's statements about my mother's character assassination, screenshots of my mother's own Facebook posts showing her at other events during times she'd claimed to be too busy for Theo. And then Rachel did something brilliant. She filed a motion to have the case heard in open court rather than closed mediation. Grandparents' rights cases were typically handled quietly, but Rachel argued that given the severity of the false claims against me, I had a right to clear my name publicly. The judge agreed. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Rachel began preparing for something my mother hadn't anticipated. We filed counterclaims: defamation for the false statements in her petition and in her communications with family members, intentional infliction of emotional distress for the systematic exclusion of Theo. We weren't asking for money. We were asking for a judicial declaration that my mother's claims were false and that her behavior constituted abuse. She wanted to use the courts as a weapon, Rachel explained. We're going to use them as a mirror, forcing her to see exactly what she's done. But I wasn't finished. While Rachel handled the legal strategy, I began executing my own plan. I created a private blog, password protected, and shared only with extended family members who had reached out to me. I documented everything there: the full story, the evidence, the timeline. I didn't editorialize or exaggerate. I simply presented facts with supporting documentation. The response was immediate. More family members began asking questions. My mother's carefully constructed narrative continued to crumble. People who had believed her version of events for years suddenly saw the manipulation. Some apologized. Others simply stopped attending family functions my parents hosted. My mother's social circle began to shrink. Then Carmen did something that shocked everyone. She filed for divorce from Derek. She cited irreconcilable differences and requested full custody of their 3 children, with supervised visitation for Derek. In her filing, she referenced his participation in the systematic exclusion and emotional abuse of his nephew, and his refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing even when confronted with evidence. Derek was blindsided. My parents were furious. But Carmen was methodical. She had her own evidence: text messages where Derek had laughed about Theo waiting at McDonald's, voicemails where he'd called Miguel slurs, recordings of family dinners where he'd participated in mocking us. She presented all of it to the divorce court as evidence of his character and judgment. The pressure on my family intensified. Derek's new employer somehow learned about the pending litigation. My father's golf club started receiving anonymous complaints about his behavior toward family members. My mother's book club suddenly had scheduling conflicts that prevented her from attending meetings. I didn't orchestrate any of these consequences. I didn't have to. The truth, once exposed, had its own momentum. People didn't want to associate with individuals who skipped a 7-year-old's birthday party for a dog's party, then tried to use the legal system to punish the mother who finally said enough. 3 weeks before the scheduled hearing, my mother's attorney withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with his client. 2 other attorneys refused to take her case after reviewing the evidence. She finally found someone willing to represent her, but Rachel recognized his name. He was known for taking cases other lawyers wouldn't touch, usually because the client was difficult or the case was unwinnable. "She's drowning," Rachel observed, "and she's going to drag your father and Derek down with her." The week before the hearing, I did one final thing. I compiled every piece of evidence, every statement, every document into a comprehensive file. Then I sent copies to everyone who had attended Derek's graduation party. Every single person who had contributed money, who had celebrated with my family while my son's birthday invitations went ignored. I included a cover letter. I wanted you to understand the full context of the graduation card that was displayed at Derek's party. Below is documentation of what my family calls dramatics, and what I call protecting my son from people who have demonstrated repeatedly and deliberately that he doesn't matter to them. I'm not asking for anything. I'm simply ensuring that the next time my mother characterizes me as the problem, you have access to the complete truth. The responses started coming within hours. Apologies, expressions of horror. Several people sent copies of checks they'd given Derek, asking for them to be voided. Others reached out to my mother directly, demanding explanations. Her carefully curated social image was disintegrating. On the day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom with my head high. Miguel was beside me, holding my hand. Rachel had 3 banker's boxes of evidence. Theo was at school, protected from all of this, but his artwork was in one of those boxes. Pages of drawings he'd made showing his family, always with grandparents and cousins as distant stick figures or omitted entirely, while his mom and dad were drawn large and bright and present. My mother sat across the courtroom with her bargain attorney, my father beside her looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Derek was there too, mandated by Carmen's divorce proceedings to attend. None of them would look at me. The judge called the court to order. My mother's attorney stood to make his opening statement, and as I listened to him try to salvage her lies, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She had started this war. I was going to finish it. Judge Helena Morrison was in her late 50s, with gray hair pulled back severely, and reading glasses that she peered over with sharp assessment. She'd been on the bench for 23 years, and Rachel had told me she had a particular distaste for frivolous custody cases and false allegations. Mrs. Henderson, Judge Morrison addressed my mother's attorney, I've reviewed the petition and the response. I have significant concerns about the factual basis of your client's claims. I'm prepared to hear evidence, but I want to warn you that if I find these allegations were made recklessly or maliciously, there will be consequences. My mother's attorney, Thomas Henderson, was sweating before he even started. Your Honor, my client is simply a concerned grandmother who has been systematically excluded from her grandson's life by a daughter who has made increasingly irrational decisions. Let's start with the incident that precipitated the current estrangement, Judge Morrison said, flipping through the files. The child's 7th birthday party. Mrs. Martinez, you're claiming your family deliberately missed this event. Mr. Henderson, you're claiming your client wasn't properly informed. Let's hear the evidence. Rachel stood, and for the next 30 minutes, she methodically destroyed my mother's story. She presented the invitation sent 6 weeks in advance, the text messages where my mother confirmed attendance, the day of messages where I tried to reach everyone. Then she displayed the Facebook photos on the courtroom screen. My entire family at Princess Fluffy's party, timestamps showing they were there during the exact window of Theo's party. Your Honor, Rachel said, the respondent's petition claims my client suddenly cut off contact without explanation. I'd like to establish that this 7-year-old child spent 4 hours waiting at McDonald's for grandparents who chose to attend a dog's birthday party instead. Judge Morrison's expression was glacial as she studied the photos. Mr. Henderson, does your client dispute the authenticity of these images? My mother whispered frantically to her attorney. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client acknowledges being at this gathering, but maintains she had a prior commitment to her neighbor and wasn't aware it conflicted with the birthday party. The invitation was sent 6 weeks prior, and your client confirmed attendance, Judge Morrison said flatly. Are you claiming she forgot? My client is 63 years old. Memory issues are not uncommon. Rachel pulled out another document. Your Honor, the respondent's own medical records, which she submitted as part of this petition to demonstrate her fitness as a caregiver, show no cognitive impairment. She also submitted evidence of managing her household finances, maintaining a social calendar, and organizing multiple family events. She can't simultaneously claim competence to care for a child in memory impairment to excuse abandoning him on his birthday. Judge Morrison made a note. Continue, Ms. Chen. Rachel then presented the text message thread where my mother had called me dramatic and cut me off. She presented Carmen's statement about being explicitly told not to attend the party. She presented my documentation of 7 years of missed events, broken promises, and systematic exclusion. Your Honor, I'd now like to address the false statements in the respondent's petition. Rachel's voice took on an edge. The petition claims Theo is emotionally disturbed and socially isolated. I have statements here from his pediatrician, his school counselor, and 3 teachers, all attesting that he is thriving academically and socially. She handed the documents to the bailiff to pass to the judge. The petition claims my client suffers from postpartum depression 7 years after giving birth and is making irrational decisions. I have a psychiatric evaluation performed last month by Dr. Sarah Kim, who found my client to be mentally healthy with no signs of depression, anxiety, or any other condition that would impair her parenting. The petition claims my client's husband is controlling and potentially abusive. I have a home study report conducted by Children's Services at our request, which found the home environment to be safe, nurturing, and appropriate. I also have character statements from Miguel Martinez's employer and colleagues attesting to his character. Judge Morrison was writing rapidly. My mother had gone pale. Most concerning, Your Honor, Rachel continued, is this statement in the petition that my client suddenly and without explanation severed contact with her family. This is demonstrably false. My client sent a graduation card to her brother, with a note explaining exactly why she was maintaining boundaries. The respondent then texted my client saying, "Don't bother coming to any future events. We're done with your dramatics." The respondent initiated the severance, not my client. She projected the text message on the screen. My mother's words, in her own phone, undeniable. "So let me be clear about what actually happened," Rachel said, walking toward the center of the courtroom. My client's family neglected her son for years. When this neglect culminated in abandoning him on his birthday for a dog's party, my client finally set a boundary. The respondent then threatened to cut her off. When my client declined to contribute $800 to her brother's graduation gift after he participated in this abandonment, the respondent escalated to filing false allegations in this court. "Mr. Henderson?" Judge Morrison's tone was dangerous. "Response?" He shuffled papers frantically. "Your Honor, families have disagreements. My client is simply trying to maintain a relationship with her grandson." By filing a petition full of false allegations, Judge Morrison's voice could have frozen fire. By claiming her daughter is mentally ill, that her son-in-law is abusive, that her grandson is disturbed, all demonstrably untrue. That's not maintaining a relationship, Mr. Henderson. That's weaponizing this court. "Your Honor, if I may," "You may not." Judge Morrison turned to my mother directly. "Mrs. Martinez, stand up." My mother rose shakily. For the first time since I'd entered the courtroom, we made eye contact. "Did you or did you not tell family members not to attend your grandson's birthday party?" Judge Morrison asked. My mother's voice was barely audible. I may have suggested yes or no. "Yes, but did you or did you not go to a dog's birthday party instead of your grandson's party?" Silence. "Answer the question." "Yes. Did you or did you not file this petition knowing that the allegations about your daughter's mental health and your grandson's well-being were false?" My mother's attorney tried to intervene. "Your Honor, my client was relying on her observations. Your client is a former elementary school teacher." Judge Morrison cut him off. "She knows what an emotionally disturbed child looks like. She also knows her daughter is a registered nurse who works full-time at a hospital, which would be impossible if she were suffering from the severe mental illness described in this petition. So I'll ask again. Mrs. Martinez, did you knowingly file false allegations?" My mother looked at the floor. "I was trying to protect my grandson from a bad situation." "What bad situation? The one where he has excellent grades, close friends, and parents who actually show up for him?" Judge Morrison's voice was scathing. "Or the bad situation where his grandmother abandoned him at McDonald's for 4 hours on his birthday, and then tried to punish his mother for finally having enough?" My mother started crying. Real tears. The kind she used to deploy strategically at family gatherings when she wanted sympathy. Judge Morrison was unmoved. "I'm denying this petition in its entirety," she said. "There is no basis whatsoever for grandparents' rights when the grandparents have actively neglected the child and the parent is providing excellent care. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning you, Mrs. Martinez, for filing false allegations. You will pay Ms. Martinez's attorney fees, which I'm informed total approximately $8,400 so far." My mother gasped. My father put his head in his hands. "Additionally," Judge Morrison continued, "I'm issuing a restraining order. You are to have no contact with Ms. Martinez or her son, directly or indirectly, for a period of 3 years. If at that time you wish to petition for visitation, you may do so, but you will need to demonstrate substantial change in your behavior and attitude." "Your Honor, please," my mother begged. "He's my grandson. He's the grandchild you abandoned at a restaurant for 4 hours." Judge Morrison said coldly. "The grandchild you've ignored for 7 years. The grandchild you called emotionally disturbed in court documents despite knowing he's thriving. You don't get to claim that relationship now. You had it. You destroyed it. And then you tried to use my courtroom to punish the mother who protected him from your neglect." She signed the order with a flourish. "We're adjourned. Ms. Chen, submit your final billing within 30 days. Mr. Henderson, I suggest you counsel your client about the potential consequences of filing false allegations in future cases." The bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Morrison left the courtroom. The moment she was gone, my mother collapsed into her seat, sobbing. My father sat frozen. Derek had his face in his hands. Rachel gathered her materials calmly. "That went well." she said quietly. Miguel pulled me into a tight hug. It's over, he whispered. You did it, but it wasn't over. Not quite. As we walked out of the courtroom, I paused near where my family was sitting. My mother looked up at me, her makeup destroyed by tears, her carefully maintained appearance shattered. I hope it was worth it, I said quietly. Destroying your relationship with your grandson to avoid admitting you were wrong. Spending $8, $400 to punish me for setting a boundary, using the courts as a weapon. I hope Princess Fluffy's party was everything you hoped for. Audrey, please, she whispered. Can't we just... No, I said. We can't. You made your choice years ago. You chose cruelty and neglect and lies. Today, a judge confirmed what I've known for years. I'm not the problem. You are. I walked out of that courthouse into bright sunlight. Miguel kept his arm around me, steady and present the way he'd always been. My phone buzzed with a text from Theo's school. Theo's drawing won first place in the art show. He's so excited to tell you. That was my family. The one that mattered. The one that showed up. The fallout from the court ruling spread through my extended family like wildfire. Rachel had arranged for a court reporter to provide transcripts, which several family members requested. Suddenly, everyone had access to exactly what had been said under oath, what evidence had been presented, and most damning of all, my mother's admission that she deliberately excluded Theo from his own birthday party. My Aunt Patricia called me the evening after the hearing. I read the transcript, she said, her voice hollow. Rebecca, I need you to know I'm horrified. Your mother called me last week, crying about how you were destroying the family. She made it sound like you'd fabricated everything. But watching her admit in court that she chose a dog's party over her grandson, that she told family members not to attend his birthday, I can't unsee that. I won't. She wasn't the only one. Over the next week, I received messages from 11 different relatives, all expressing some version of the same sentiment. Shock, horror, and guilt for having believed my mother's narrative for so long. Several asked if there was anything they could do to make it up to Theo. You can respect the boundaries, I told each of them. And if you genuinely want a relationship with him, you can build it slowly, with consistency and respect. But I'm done with grand gestures and empty promises. The most satisfying response came from my mother's book club. 3 members called her after reading the court transcript and told her they needed to take a break from their friendship. Her closest friend, Linda, the one who had hosted Princess Fluffy's party, sent me a formal apology letter. I had no idea that party conflicted with your son's birthday, she wrote. Your mother told me she'd already celebrated with Theo the weekend before and that she'd cleared the date with you. If I had known the truth, I never would have invited her, let alone posted photos. I'm deeply sorry for the role I inadvertently played in hurting your child. I believed her. Linda had grandchildren of her own and sent a $200 gift card to a toy store with a note for Theo. I sent back a polite thank you, but maintained distance. She'd been manipulated, but she'd also been part of the ecosystem that enabled my mother's cruelty. Derek's life was imploding in parallel. Carmen's divorce proceedings were brutal. She had an excellent attorney who methodically presented evidence of Derek's participation in family dysfunction and his refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing, text messages where Derek had joked about Theo being Becky's charity case, voicemails where he'd referred to Miguel as that construction worker with obvious disdain, recordings of family dinners where he'd laughed along with my parents' criticisms of my life choices. Carmen's attorney argued that Derek's values and judgment made him an unsuitable role model for their children, and that his participation in the systematic exclusion of his nephew demonstrated a troubling lack of empathy and accountability. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation. The evaluator's report was damning. Derek showed narcissistic tendencies, difficulty accepting responsibility for his actions, and an unhealthy enmeshment with his parents. The evaluator recommended parenting classes and supervised visitation until Derek could demonstrate meaningful behavior change. Derek was furious. He blamed Carmen, blamed me, blamed everyone except himself and our parents. He hired a new attorney and spent a fortune fighting the custody arrangement, but the evidence was overwhelming. Eventually, he agreed to a settlement. Carmen got primary custody. He got every other weekend supervised by a court-appointed monitor, and he had to attend therapy for 6 months before revisiting the visitation schedule. His new job became aware of the divorce proceedings when one of his colleagues saw local news coverage of the custody battle. The company placed him on probationary status, citing concerns about his judgment and character. 6 months later, he was asked to resign after his work performance deteriorated. My parents' situation worsened as well. My father, who had been relatively passive through most of the family drama, finally faced consequences at his golf club. Several members had attended Derek's graduation party and received my comprehensive documentation package. These men, most of them fathers and grandfathers themselves, were appalled. One of them, Robert Chen, Rachel's father as it turned out, confronted my father directly. "James, I've known you for 15 years. I've respected you, but reading what you and your wife did to that little boy, watching you sit silently while she filed false allegations against your own daughter, I can't break bread with someone like that." Several of us feel the same way. The club didn't formally expel him, but the social isolation was complete. My father stopped attending events. He resigned from the board. Eventually, he let his membership lapse, unable to face the judgment in everyone's eyes. My mother faced even harsher consequences. The $400 in attorney fees was just the beginning. Her homeowners association learned about the court case and investigated whether she'd violated community standards. Several neighbors came forward with stories of my mother's gossiping and social manipulation over the years. The HOA placed her on notice for creating a hostile community environment. But the worst blow came from the school district. My mother had been a substitute teacher, occasionally working at local elementary schools. Someone sent the court transcript to the district's HR department. The description of her systematically neglecting and then lying about her own grandson raised flags. The district quietly declined to call her for any future assignments. She tried to volunteer at the library, her church, the local community center. Each organization conducted background checks that revealed the court case. Each organization politely declined her services. My mother, who had built her identity on being a respected community member, found herself systematically excluded from the social structure she'd once dominated. 3 months after the court ruling, my parents' marriage began to crack. My father, facing the collapse of his social life and reputation, finally admitted to himself what he'd known all along. My mother had been the architect of this disaster, and he'd been her enabler. He filed for separation. The divorce was ugly. My father claimed emotional abuse and filed for an unequal division of assets, arguing that my mother's behavior had caused him significant financial and reputational harm. My mother countered that he was equally responsible. The proceedings dragged on for months, airing every ugly detail of their dysfunctional dynamic in court documents. Derek, now unemployed and in a custody battle, moved back in with my mother. The two of them lived in the house together, festering in resentment and blame. According to Carmen, who maintained minimal contact for the sake of her children, Derek had gained 40 pounds and rarely left the house. My mother had developed stress-related health problems that required medication. Meanwhile, my life flourished. The hospital where I worked promoted me to nurse supervisor, with a substantial raise and better hours. Miguel's construction company landed several major contracts, allowing him to take on a senior project manager role. We moved into a larger house with a fenced yard where Theo could play. Theo thrived. His art was featured in a citywide student exhibition. He made the honor roll every semester. He joined a soccer team and made new friends whose parents actually showed up to games and invited him to birthday parties. At night, when I tucked him into bed, he was happy, secure, and completely unburdened by the toxic dynamics that had plagued my childhood. The restraining order meant my parents couldn't attend these milestones. They couldn't see his art show or his soccer games. They couldn't attend his school concerts or his birthday parties. They existed on the periphery. Aware of these events through social media posts I deliberately made public, able to see what they were missing but unable to participate. I posted photos deliberately. Theo's 8th birthday party at a trampoline park surrounded by 15 classmates and their parents. His science fair project taking second place at the district competition. His Halloween costume that he designed himself. Miguel teaching him to ride a bike without training wheels. Every post was a reminder of what they'd lost. My mother created a fake Facebook account to view these posts. I knew because she accidentally liked one from the fake profile, then quickly unliked it. I didn't block her. I wanted her to see. I wanted her to understand viscerally and completely that life went on without her, better than it had ever been with her. 6 months after the court ruling, Derek showed up at my workplace. Security called me before letting him pass the lobby. I came down to find him looking haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. "I need to talk to you," he said. "We have nothing to discuss." "Rebecca, please, I lost my job. Carmen won't let me see my kids unsupervised." Mom and Dad are getting divorced. The family is destroyed. Can't we just move past this? I stared at him. This man who had once been my big brother, who I'd looked up to as a child, who had systematically participated in making my son feel worthless. Move past this, I repeated. You want me to move past 7 years of neglect. Move past you laughing when Theo waited 4 hours for grandparents who never came. Move past you calling my husband slurs and my son a charity case. Move past you supporting Mom's decision to file false allegations in court. Move past all of that so you can feel better about the consequences of your own actions. I made mistakes. No, I cut him off. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was deliberate and cruel. You made conscious choices repeatedly to demean and exclude a child, your nephew, and you only care now because you're facing consequences. Not because you understand what you did was wrong. Not because you feel genuine remorse, but because your life is falling apart and you want me to help you put it back together. What do you want from me? His voice cracked. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I'll apologize to Theo. I'll do whatever you want. I don't want anything from you anymore, Derek. That's what you don't understand. I wanted you to be my brother. I wanted you to be Theo's uncle. I wanted you to show up and be present and treat us like we mattered. You had years to do that. Years of opportunities. You chose not to. And now that there are consequences, you want me to save you from them. I won't. So that's it? You're just going to let the family stay destroyed? I didn't destroy it, I said quietly. You did. You and Mom and Dad. You destroyed it when you decided your comfort was more important than a child's well-being. You destroyed it when you chose a dog's party over your nephew's birthday. You destroyed it when you participated in lying about my mental health and my husband's character. You destroyed it when you refused to acknowledge any of it until a judge forced you to. I turned to walk back to the elevator. Derek grabbed my arm. Security immediately moved toward us. Don't touch me, I said coldly. You don't have that right anymore. He let go, his face crumbling. I don't know how to fix this. You can't, I said. That's the point. Some things, once broken, stay broken. You had something precious and you shattered it. Now you get to live with the pieces. Security escorted him out. I went back to work, hands steady, mind clear. I felt no guilt, no regret, no second guessing, just a profound sense of rightness. That evening, I got a call from Aunt Patricia. Your mother had a breakdown today. She was hospitalized for what they're calling a panic attack. Your father called me from the hospital. He wanted me to ask you to visit her. No, Rebecca, I understand your anger, but she's still your mother. She's not well. She's experiencing the consequences of her own actions, I said. I'm not responsible for managing her emotional response to finally facing accountability. She has your father. She has Derek. She has her attorney. She has medical professionals. She doesn't need me, and even if she did, I'm not available to her. That's very cold. Is it? Because when Theo was crying at McDonald's, asking what he'd done wrong, where was Mom's concern for his emotional well-being? When she was filing court documents calling me mentally ill, where was her concern for how that would affect me? When she was telling family members I was an unfit parent, where was her concern for my mental health? Aunt Patricia was silent. I'm not being cold, I continued. I'm being consistent. I'm applying the same standard to her that she applied to my son. If that feels cold to you, maybe sit with why you think a 7-year-old should show more grace under cruelty than a 63-year-old woman should show basic decency to her own grandchild. 2 weeks later, my father called me directly, violating the restraining order. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail. Rebecca, it's Dad. I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry for everything. I was a coward. I let your mother control the narrative. I participated in excluding Theo because it was easier than standing up to her. I watched you try so hard to be part of this family, and I did nothing to make space for you. I failed you as a father, and I failed Theo as a grandfather. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to ask for it, but I needed you to hear, from me, that you were right about everything. I see that now. I'm getting divorced. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who could do what I did. None of this fixes anything. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what we did to you and your son. I'm sorry. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Miguel found me sitting in our bedroom, phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face. "Is it your mom?" he asked, concerned. "My dad," I said. He apologized. An actual, genuine apology. "How do you feel about that?" I thought about it carefully. "It doesn't change anything, I finally said. An apology doesn't erase 7 years of neglect. It doesn't give Theo back the grandfather who should have been there. It doesn't undo the trauma of that court case or the lies or the abandonment. But it's more than Mom or Derek have ever offered. It's acknowledgement. It's taking responsibility. It's the first time anyone in my family has said I was wrong without immediately following it with excuses or deflection. Does that mean you want to respond?" "No," I said, wiping my eyes. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm glad he said it. I'm glad at least one of them finally understands what they did." 3 years passed. The restraining order expired, but my parents never petitioned for visitation. My father sent cards on Theo's birthdays and Christmas, always with the same message. "Thinking of you, hope you're well, love, Grandpa." Never asking for anything, never demanding a response, just maintaining a thread of connection that acknowledged Theo's existence. My mother sent nothing. According to Aunt Patricia, she'd become increasingly isolated, unable to accept responsibility for what had happened. She blamed me, blamed the court system, blamed everyone except herself. She and Derek still lived together, both unemployed, both bitter, both drowning in debt from attorney fees, and Derek's child support obligations. Carmen remarried, a kind man who treated her children well. She sent me annual updates about Derek's continued dysfunction, not out of malice, but as documentation in case he ever tried to rehabilitate his reputation. He'd lost weight but gained an alcohol problem. He'd had 3 more jobs, each lasting less than 6 months. His supervised visitation had been reduced to once a month after he showed up drunk to one session. The family empire my mother had carefully constructed had completely collapsed. Holidays that once gathered 30 people now drew maybe 6. The annual Christmas party at their house had ended. The elaborate Sunday dinners had stopped. The network of relatives, friends, and social connections had dissolved. My mother, who had spent decades positioning herself at the center of family and community life, now existed on the margins, watching through fake social media accounts as life continued without her. 10 years after that McDonald's birthday party, I stood in the auditorium of Theo's high school watching him receive the Presidential Scholar Award for Artistic Excellence. His portfolio, a series of mixed media pieces exploring themes of chosen family and emotional resilience, had earned him a full scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design. Miguel sat beside me, his hand in mine. In the row behind us sat Aunt Patricia and her husband, Uncle Tom and his family, Carmen and her husband with their children, and Rachel Chen and her father Robert. Our chosen family. The people who had proven through years of consistent presence that love was an action, not just a word. Theo's acceptance speech was brief but powerful. "Art saved me," he said, his voice steady despite speaking to 500 people. "When I was young, I felt invisible to people who should have seen me. Art gave me a way to be visible, to tell my story, to create beauty from pain. I'm grateful to every teacher who encouraged me, every friend who supported me, and especially to my parents who taught me that my worth isn't determined by who chooses to ignore it, but by who chooses to show up." He looked directly at us, and I saw the confident, creative, compassionate young man he'd become, not despite what had happened, but because of how we'd responded to it. We'd protected him, prioritized him, built a life where his value was never questioned. After the ceremony, as people congratulated Theo and took photos, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. I saw the news article about Theo's scholarship. "I'm so proud of him. I wish I could tell him that." "Dad," Miguel saw me reading it. "Your father?" "Yeah. Are you going to respond?" I thought about it. 10 years of cards on birthdays and Christmas. 10 years of therapy, according to Aunt Patricia. 10 years of divorced solitude, living in a small apartment, working at a community college in their finance department. He'd rebuilt a modest life, never asked for forgiveness, never demanded access, just maintained a distant presence that said, "I still exist, and I still care." "Maybe," I said finally. "Not today, but maybe someday, when Theo's old enough to make his own choice about whether he wants a relationship with his grandfather." "And your mother?" I looked at the photos on my phone of Theo's artwork, his acceptance speech, his scholarship certificate. Then I thought about the last update from Aunt Patricia. My mother, still living with Derek, still unemployed, still bitter, still blaming everyone else for the consequences of her own choices. "No," I said firmly. "Some people earn second chances through consistent change." Some people don't. She made her choice 10 years ago when she picked a dog's party over her grandson. She reinforced that choice when she filed false allegations. She cemented it when she refused to take accountability. That's who she chose to be. I'm not interested in pretending otherwise. That evening, we hosted a celebration dinner at our house. 20 people crammed into our dining room, laughing and telling stories. Theo sat at the head of the table, surrounded by people who genuinely loved him, who had shown up for every milestone, who had chosen to be his family. Carmen pulled me aside during dessert. "You know what's funny?" she said. "Derek called me last week, first time in months. He wanted to know if I'd seen the article about Theo's scholarship. I think it finally hit him what he missed out on." "What did you tell him?" "I told him congratulations on reading about his nephew's achievements in the newspaper like a stranger. I told him that's what he chose when he decided cruelty was easier than kindness." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "My kids ask about him sometimes. I tell them their father made choices that have consequences, that actions matter more than apologies, that you can't break something precious and expect everyone to pretend it's not broken. Do you regret leaving him?" "Never. Best decision I ever made." My kids are growing up watching their mom set boundaries and maintain standards. They're learning that family isn't obligation, it's reciprocity. That you don't owe loyalty to people who treat you poorly just because you share DNA. She squeezed my hand. "You taught me that. Watching you protect Theo, watching you refuse to accept mistreatment, it gave me permission to do the same." Later that night, after everyone had left and Theo had gone to bed, Miguel and I sat on our back porch. The same porch where, 10 years earlier, I'd sat crying after the McDonald's disaster, unsure how to protect my son from a family that didn't value him. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Miguel asked. "That your family had been different?" "I used to," I admitted. "I used to wish I could make them love Theo the way he deserved. I used to wish I could be enough to change their minds. But I learned something important. You can't make people choose you. You can only choose yourself." "And you don't feel guilty about how everything fell apart for them?" "No," I said without hesitation. "They fell apart because they built their lives on a foundation of cruelty and control. When that foundation cracked, everything collapsed. That's not my fault. That's not my responsibility. That's just gravity." I thought about my mother, still checking my social media from fake accounts, still watching life continue without her. I thought about Derek, unemployed and alcoholic, barely seeing his own children. I thought about the extended family members who'd believed my mother's lies for years, who now avoided her at the grocery store. "They chose this," I continued. "They chose to prioritize a dog's birthday party over their grandson. They chose to lie in court documents. They chose to never apologize, never change, never acknowledge wrongdoing. Every consequence they've faced is the direct result of their own choices. I'm not responsible for protecting them from the outcomes of their actions." "And your dad? The cards he sends?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Maybe when Theo's 18, I'll let him decide if he wants a relationship with his grandfather. But it'll be Theo's choice, not mine. And it'll be contingent on seeing actual sustained change, not just words, not just cards. Real, demonstrable evidence that he's become someone different than the man who sat silent while his grandson waited at McDonald's." Miguel pulled me close. "You know what I'm proud of? You didn't become like them. You could have. You could have let all that bitterness and cruelty make you hard. Instead, you protected our son, built an amazing career, created this whole community of people who love us. You won." He was right. I had won, not by destroying my family, they'd done that themselves, but by building something better. A life where love was demonstrated through presence, where family was defined by consistency, where worth was never conditional. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Rebecca, it's your mother. Your father gave me your new number. I've been in therapy for 6 months. I'd like to talk. Please." I stared at that message for a long moment. 6 months of therapy after 10 years of refusing accountability. 6 months of effort after a decade of damage. I thought about responding, explaining why 6 months didn't erase 10 years, why therapy didn't automatically earn forgiveness. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked the number. Some bridges once burned stay ashes. Some relationships once destroyed stay destroyed. My mother had her chance, had thousands of chances over 10 years. She'd chosen every single time to be right rather than be kind, to blame rather than grow, to demand rather than earn. I'd spent 10 years building a beautiful life without her. Theo was thriving. My marriage was strong. My career was fulfilling. I had a community of chosen family who showed up consistently and loved us unconditionally. I had peace. I wasn't interested in trading that peace for 6 months of therapy and a text message. My mother had taught me, through her own actions, that blood doesn't create obligation. That family is something you earn through consistency, respect, and love. She'd failed that test, repeatedly and deliberately. Now she got to live with those choices, just like I was living with mine. And mine had turned out pretty damn well.